Welcome. Thank you for joining us at Empowering Creatives to Live Their Dreams. I'm Jessica Osrek. Today we have the owner and head of agency at Clean. Let's welcome Lee Davis. Welcome, Lee.
Hey, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I'm interested to know, Lee, you've spent over 30 years in advertising, starting with
Correct.
a curiosity. So what got you into this, you had mentioned, is a 30-second spot or an 8.5, 11 size piece of paper, and how that can inspire action. So how has this curiosity shaped your career and your creative philosophy?
Oof, that's a great loaded question. Honestly, curiosity to me is the root of all things creative, and it's constantly trying to find new and different ways to communicate with people and to get a message across and to impact them truly on an emotional standpoint. So throughout my career, curiosity continues to just push to find different ways of doing things. It's interesting. Someone asked me the other day, what do you want to have your legacy be going forward? And I thought if there was a way, particularly in today's society with so much of communications being instantaneous and almost disposable, is there an opportunity to create communications that last, 10 years, 100 years? Mm. Is there a piece of creative that you can put out there that lasts indefinitely versus what we're currently going? So that's the curiosity that keeps driving me, is trying to figure out different ways and different things to do with what we're tasked with.
Mm-hmm. Have you been inspired by anything that you've seen last that long?
Oof. There's campaigns that last decades, and they last decades because I think they, at their root, stay centered around a certain message. It's interesting. We've just been doing a lot of research on Nike and Just Do It. Mm. And that campaign has lived on since, I think, 1988 was when the line was first introduced. And it still exists today because that message resonates on such a broad level, but it is also so ownable by Nike and what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. It's very appropriate.
Definitely.
Interesting. Yeah, and I was actually at a World War II museum earlier this week, and they showed campaigns that they ran during the war, and they're hanging up in this museum. And so when you said that, that kind of came to mind as a way that a campaign lives on, is how advertising played a part in like a major historical time period.
Definitely. And as soon as you were talking about that, it reminds me of going in other places where you see like some of the old Guinness ads from decades ago, the 50s, the 60s, even before that, during World War II, Guinness was putting out messages that resonated with people. And you see them in archives today, and it still resonates because it's true to what that brand's about.
Yeah, we think we've evolved so much, and then we see something like that, and we're like, actually, maybe we haven't come as far as we think we have.
Yes, very true.
So speaking of big brands like Guinness, you've worked with some of the world's most iconic brands, from Nike and Coca-Cola to Johnson & Johnson. So what lessons did you take from those experiences that continue to guide your work today?
Man, you're hitting me with all the fireballs. It's perfect. Each one of those is very different.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, it was more about hearkening back to what was the truth about Coke at its beginning, when Dr. Pemberton was creating the elixir he was making and selling in his drugstore. To today, it's finding what is that core value of that brand, and then just using what's happening in culture today to make it relevant. I think what goes wrong is when companies start holding up a mirror to society and going, hey, look, they're drinking this brand, you should drink it too. And it's not about representing or showing people doing something. It's about being true to who you are and having people want to join that group. And I think that's why Nike's been as successful as they have for so many years, is because they invite people into their world. They don't try to assimilate into someone else's world.
Interesting. And there is a topic that I've brought up before in my podcast because it really struck a chord in me just as far as how true this is. But I've heard that because of the digital era that we're in and the platforms, that brands want to position themselves more as belonging in social groups than having a social group. But you said that that's a little bit different with Nike. So what's your take on that?
My take on that is I think it is about being true to yourself and being that own group, but then finding a way to communicate in a relevant manner to other groups. So, I mean, it's the classic Nike, I think it was a Dan Wyden quote that said Nike didn't discover the power of advertising, they discovered the power of their own voice. So it's about understanding what your voice is, because in communicating with one group, you're going to speak one way, and communicating with another group, you're going to speak a different way, but it's still going to be true to who you are. I mean, it's like people. We can communicate with a wide variety of different people, but it's still you talking to those people. So I think it's the same as that. I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that question. I thought you were going to talk about how digital is lessening the ability for brands to have long-term resonance. And I think it's interesting because as soon as you're starting to question, that's where my head went. And I equated it to music. Think of music right now, other bands coming out today that will have the staying power in 50 years that the Rolling Stones had. I don't know.
Right.
Because there's so much that's coming out right now. It's hard to have something make the imprint that some of those others have.
That's interesting you bring that up because I've been following this lady who really highlights the 80s. And that 80s music, it has a nostalgic, but also like, I mean, I guess maybe it's the same nostalgic, calming type of effect, that music that you listen to. And it's true, I've been thinking about the evolution of music and how there's some bands that started, I mean, you look at like U2 or even bands that didn't last that long, but their music, that impact has lasted that long. That's what I'm hearing you saying.
Yep.
So, but I also do love that the platforms allow all sorts of people to contribute.
Agreed.
Too.
Most definitely, yeah. And that's the other great part of about having a clear understanding of who you are as a brand, because if you understand that clearly about who you are, it allows all those other people to participate in it on kind of your terms, but they all want to be a part and have a say in it and play in it.
So you are heading up Clean.
Yes.
And you have worked at a lot of different impressive agencies. So as far as the brand goes, there's a lot of talks about personal brand. And especially as being the owner, founder of Elysian Staffing, we're representing a variety of very talented creative and marketing professionals who are going out and getting their jobs. So what is your take? How important is it as an individual to have a personal brand as it applies to looking for a job and contributing to society through social platforms?
I think it's incredibly important. I mean, at the end of the day, we are who we are and we form what we do based on our point of view, really. And I think that's maybe one of the hardest things for someone, particularly coming out of school, to understand that they need to put their point of view out there and be willing to communicate it and be willing to be 100% themselves in doing so. Definitely the hardest thing, but it's also the most important thing in our business is for people. I mean, it's a subjective business at the end of the day. And so having a very clear understanding of your point of view and why you believe in your point of view, and having information and data, if you like data, I'm not a big data geek, but if you're big into the data side of things, having the data that can support your point of view, that's what matters and that's critical. But it's a challenge coming out of school. The one thing that I've told, because I've talked to a lot of kids that are trying to find a job in this business, and the thing that I tell them over and over again is find the agencies that you want to be a part of and not let them stop until they hire you. Because I think too many people are just scatter shooting out resumes to anybody and everybody and aren't really focused. And as an owner of an agency, I want people that want to come here and work here. I don't want people that just want a job. And I think that holds true for anybody. So I try and make sure that I help guide them in finding what it is they want, find those agencies that represent that, and then just be consistent. Show up at their door every day until they hire you.
So tell me an experience of someone that you hired that did something like that.
It's not someone I hired, but it's a story I use all the time because it impresses me and blows my mind. There's a woman named Jenny Campbell who grew up in North Carolina, went to the University of North Carolina, wanted to go work at Wieden and Kennedy. And when she graduated, she drove across country to Portland, Oregon, and showed up at their doorstep every day until they hired her. And then today she's the CMO of Kate Spade. So
Wow.
she has gone on to do tremendously successful things, but it's always because her drive was to go do certain things and she wasn't going to take no.
So as someone who is in the audience who's like, great, I'm going to go and I'm going to show up on this agency's doorstep or even a brand's doorstep,
Yep.
what else do you do? Is there some sort of value that you offer, or are there any strategies to make that drive across the country or flight, a few states over?
I think the
Worth
first
it?
value is to show up in person. I mean, it makes all the difference in the world. Just think about how many resumes get sent to all these businesses every day, or emails, or DMs, whatever it is. Someone is always reaching out, trying on LinkedIn, trying everywhere else to get in. It's the people that knock on the door and want to have a real conversation that make the difference and stand out the most. I mean, we hired a design intern one summer solely because she walked to the front door, had a resume, was super impressive in communicating with us, and just was in person and wanted a job learning what we do and some guidance and some support. And we hired her on the spot.
Okay. And so it sounds like this person was also impressive. So they presented themselves nicely. They probably made really good eye contact, right?
Good
So it's
confidence.
confidence.
Yes.
They probably knew about the agency. They had done their homework.
Yep.
They came with their
Knew-
resume.
Knew about the agency, knew about the industry. I mean, that's the other thing. Finding people that are just ad geeks is super impressive too, because not only do they want a job in this business, they also are passionate about this business and they're curious about it. Bringing it back to curiosity. They are constantly looking at the ad rags. They're searching online to find different examples of great design or great writing, and they'll never stop looking for those things. And you can tell if someone's truly into it or they're just wanting a job because they think the industry's cool. I mean, that's fine. I think that, that's not why I got into the business, but it is. It can be fun.
Yeah, and it can be cool, right?
It can be very cool. Most
Yeah.
definitely. It can be a pain some days too, but I think the cool outweighs the pain, which is fun.
So you have worked at agencies in New York, Portland. You even had a stop here in Richmond, not far
I
from
did.
where I live, at the Martin Agency.
Yep.
Now you're down more south in North Carolina. So what are some of the different experiences that you've had throughout that journey that have really shaped you to be the owner of Clean?
Well, all those are all different size agencies and all different complexities because some are part of one holding company, others are part of different holding companies. Wyden's independent, Clean is independent. And so you learn the way different agencies operate. Like in New York, it's interesting because there's so many different agencies in New York City that people can spend an entire career living in one place, but working at 20 different agencies because they just go across the street, over to Brooklyn, wherever they're going. But if you go to a place like Richmond, where the Martin Agency is still the predominant agency, there are a lot of others that have sprung up that are very good, but Martin's still the predominant one. You go to Portland, Wyden's still the predominant one. So it's also learning from those entities what it means to be the creative firepower in a community, and then how do you leverage that to build an even stronger creative community, because you want to keep pulling people from around the area into what you're doing. That's a lot of what we talk about here at Clean, is how do we create more of that creative community in Raleigh. We're the capital of North Carolina. There's a lot of government that takes place around here, but there's also this underground of tremendous creative people that it would be magical if we could bring them all together on a regular basis.
So what makes Raleigh a creative hub of North Carolina?
I don't know if it is right now, in all honesty. I think Raleigh has the potential to be. I think a lot of people would say Durham is more creative just because it's a little edgier and grittier. Keep Durham dirty is one of their slogans. They like to keep it that way. But I think Raleigh has so many opportunities, particularly with all these companies moving here, for entrepreneurs and creativity to just explode. And you also have great institutions like NC State, Duke, UNC, and then all the other smaller colleges that are around the area that keep inspiring kids to go out and be entrepreneurs, to learn, to try, to grow, to do whatever. And I think there's a supportive community here too that helps that entrepreneurial spirit. So trying to figure out how we can get more of the creativity side of it is what we've talked about a lot. And I've met with a couple amazing people recently, a guy that started Raleigh Denim, and he just came here because he thought it'd be a great idea to try and create the best pair of jeans in the world. And they make incredible jeans all right here, 2 blocks from us. They hand sew them right here. They do everything right here, which you don't see happen a lot anymore.
And so you mentioned that businesses are coming to Raleigh. You mentioned tech businesses primarily.
A lot
Is
of
that
tech,
correct?
yep.
Any big names?
Apple keeps planning to build their East Coast campus here, but
Okay.
the economy has pushed it back a little bit. They've got the land. They know exactly where they're going to build it. It's just a matter of time to make it happen. And then you have a number of automobile companies that are in the area. VinFast, the Korean all-electric company, built their big plant just south of here in Chatham County. So there's a lot of that tech that's happening around here, and a lot of biotech.
So you had curiosity that brought you into the industry. Where
Yep.
did you start in the industry, and what was the evolution of your career to where you are now?
Yeah, so I majored in accounting in college with no desire to ever be an accountant. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that advertising was something that always interested me. And so I audited classes at the University of North Carolina in the School of Journalism. And there was a professor there, Bob Lauterborn, who's still around. I think he's in his early 80s now. Fantastic man. And he connected me with a one-man shop that I went to work for originally, a place called AdMark. And it was interesting because I had to learn how to cold call. I had to learn how to sell. I had to learn what media was about. I had to learn, we were still doing spray-mounted ads and cutting out the type and putting it in. I'm dating myself a little bit now. Computers weren't all what they are today. And so I just got to learn a lot of the foundational elements of the business. And then a good friend of mine was at another agency, so I went there, and then a creative buddy of mine left there to go to another one in Raleigh, and I left to go there, and just kept kind of bouncing around to smaller agencies until I got a call from Martin to go up there.
And what roles were you bouncing around in?
I was always an account guy, and I started off as the bank guy. Banks were my client. So
Okay.
the first agency I was at, I had a bank, Central Carolina Bank, and then I went to another agency because of my bank experience, and I went to work on BB&T, and then that's what took me to the Martin agency, was to go work on Bank One.
Okay. And I'm sure you have expanded out beyond banks.
Yeah, I don't think I've been on a bank since then.
Since then, that was your last one, Bank One.
It was. And it was interesting. Bank One, I only worked on it for about a month because after I got to the Martin agency, they decided to drop Bank One to pitch Discover Card.
Okay.
And so I moved into new business for about 6 months and just pitched businesses.
How
Which
was
was
that
super
experience?
interesting.
Yeah,
It was great. Yeah. It was at a time when Martin was trying to figure itself out, We weren't very successful in our new business pitches, but it was an
Okay.
incredible learning experience on my side.
I bet. Yeah, because if you want to be successful and there's failure involved, you need to evaluate, tweak.
Definitely. Yeah, and in this business, you always have to be pitching new business. And the hopes are you learn from when you don't win it and you learn from when you do win it because both of them have great value in them.
So, what do you see as the biggest shift in advertising and branding today, and how does Clean help businesses and creatives navigate these changes?
There's a point that everyone thinks they can do it. Because technology has gotten to a place that it has, I think people have lost sight of the value provided by an advertising agency. So it's constantly trying to prove your worth. And I think a lot of that worth comes from having an outside perspective, an outside point of view, and having a real pulse on what's happening in the world and what's happening with people that a lot of times in client roles you lose sight of because you get tunnel vision and just doing what you're doing and stay focused on that. So part of the challenge and the big shift is really how do we continue to remain relevant in a changing world and prove our worth? Because if anyone can put social media up there, then what's the role for an agency? And I think the role truly is to help guide them and help be smarter about how we do it and help use their dollars in a more efficient and better way and a more impactful way because we can bring insight and perspective that they may not have. And so at Clean, that's what we do. And we also live into our name because we don't try and muddy the waters and clutter everything up. We keep everything very simple and clear because there's just too much out there that you can get lost in. So if you're not very pointed in your message and you're not very clear on what you're saying and you don't stand out in a way that is impactful, you're just going to get glazed over.
I've heard some discussions that the whole format of agencies has been challenged. And I don't think that agencies are going to be completely irrelevant. I hear you guys are reinventing yourselves. I understand having to prove your self-worth. Where do you see the agency world moving forward?
It's one of these things that I think goes through cycles because it used to be that agencies were very specific in a role they played, and then they would partner with others. Like media agencies just did media, creative just did creative. There were strategy people that just did strategy. And then there was the big wave where everyone brought them all together under one roof and created these big, huge agencies with loads and loads of layers. And now you're starting to see more agencies form as smaller entities that have a network of partners that they use and call on based on what they're going after, what their project is they're working on. So if they're working in education, they might go out and find the smartest person to work on education creative, the smartest person who does insights against students and recruiting students and finding other people in those areas and bringing them in for that project to work on it. So you're getting better people working on your business on a more regular basis than I think the old agency structures used to garner. I mean, it used to be that whoever had availability and space in their hours were the ones getting put on the business. It may or may not be the right person for that business. It's just who was available. Now it's more trying to find who are the right people to run that business and to work on that business. And then when they're not needed, they're not on your payroll. And so they're going off and working on someone else's project.
Do you attribute that to the tools that we now have to access people? I mean, I know back in the day, it was literally you had a Rolodex.
Correct.
Right? I mean, I'm thinking when you're talking about this, I'm thinking like Mad Men,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so, but now, I mean, anybody could contact anybody. It's just a matter of understanding what you need and then reaching out and finding that person and connecting with the person, then persuading them to come and work on your project, right? There is a process, and it does take time, but you're agreeing with me. But how
No,
do
it's
you?
true. Yeah. I mean, and there's a place that was started called We Are Rosie. I don't know if
Oh,
you know them.
I've never heard of them. No.
Stephanie Natty Olson is the one who started it, and companies hire them to find people, be it agencies or brands, hire them to find people, be it one person or whole teams, to come in and work at different times as a freelance group. And I don't know how many people they have now. Last I was paying attention, it was well over 2,000, 2,500 people within their network. And so there are places that do make it so much easier to find talented people, and talented people based on what you're needing at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do here at Elysian too with recruiting, because freelance full time, temp to perm,
Yep.
and having that network of 2,000, 4,000. But there's a lot of tools. There's mobile applications, there's LinkedIn. So that's interesting. There is a lot more than back in the day when you had the Rolodex. So it's definitely been an evolution for sure. So you touched on data
Yes.
and creative.
Yes.
And so I hear that you, as an agency owner, are proving your worth, being able to show value to your clients. So even though you may not be big on data, how does Clean incorporate data to make decisions?
And I'll rephrase. I am big on data, not to, I guess, dictate how you show up creatively, but I love data on the back end to understand how we did it work, did it not? I don't like it on the front end, I guess is the easiest way to say that. And that's how we use it. We use it as a guide to understand, is what we're doing working? If not, where are places that we see that it might be working some, and how can we go further down that path? If it's not working at all, can we just scrap everything and try something totally different? If some things are working incredibly well, are there reasons why that is? And I think trying to understand that more than just going, oh, these are just working, let's just do more of that. Let's understand why those are working. So maybe we can do, yes, more, but maybe there's some other things that can leverage those key points that we can be doing. So there is a lot on the back end that we use to help guide us. And I mean, improving our worth, at the end of the day, we're trying to help companies grow. So
Yeah.
if you're not growing and you're not selling product or getting people to show up, I mean, you can either sell product, drive your service, get people to enroll in your school, get people to come to your business, get people to visit your location, whatever it is. If those things aren't growing, then we're not doing our job.
Right. You mentioned that you hold true to your name, Clean. And so is there also a level of transparency that
Yes,
you
definitely.
provide? And does that include keeping track of, this is how things were with your business when you came in, remember? And this is how we've evolved. So we
Yes.
are a valuable asset, and the money that you're investing, you're getting a great ROI.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, we are completely transparent. I think most agencies have realized the need for being transparent in what you're doing and how you're doing it. Without it, I mean, at the end of the day, our business is rooted in trust. And if you're not being transparent with the other side, there's no opportunity for them to trust you. Yeah, and I guess that's just what a real partner is. We like to consider ourselves partners. I will say, if I can, and I probably can, it's not if I can, I just haven't done it. I would love to make a neon light that has the word vendor with a big red circle and a line through it, because I hate the word vendor. Because vendors are replaced based on dollars and not what the value they're bringing beyond that. And we want to bring value far beyond the dollars you spend with us.
So is that how you internally refer to your clients, is partners?
Yes.
Okay.
We even call our account people partnership leads.
Good.
because we don't want them to just be an account manager or an account executive. We want them to truly be someone who's leading that partnership.
How else do you incorporate core values and various perceptions within your business that you find are helpful?
As you said that, I was like, wow, we should really write down what our core values are. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad I gave you that
I
task
don't
to
think
do.
we haven't done that. But it's interesting. I think if you polled everyone here at the agency, they would probably say, like, if you gave them 5 things, I'm sure the vast majority would have 5 of the same things. Because I
Okay.
think it's just something that's felt amongst us. We are truthful, honest, and transparent. We do push to make the work better. We don't take ourselves too seriously because we're in advertising. What else would I think people would say? I get leery at times. Sometimes people talk about it as family. And I get somewhat leery about that because family and work is a weird one.
Yeah,
You don't let people go in your family.
right. Yeah, and I've heard that too, where some companies still are like, we're a family. And then I've seen comments on LinkedIn where it's like, please do not tell me your company's a family
Yeah.
because when you need to take care of the bottom line, I know
Yeah.
you're going to let me go,
Correct.
right? Or someone go.
Yeah.
And so it's good to be conscientious of that term.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
it sounds like respectful is an important one in your
Most
company.
definitely. Most definitely. Yep. And people do respect each other and respect each other's opinions. I mean, again, as I stated earlier, it's an opinion-based business. And one of the greatest lessons I learned while at Wyden is if you put all the emphasis on making the work better to do the job that you want it to do, you can have heated arguments between individuals and people don't take it personally because they know that it's all in service of making the work harder.
Do you feel like you have created that culture at Clean?
I think we're getting there. I don't know if it's 100% there.
Yeah. I mean, that is not an easy task.
No, not at all. Particularly if it's not something that was familiar here before. I think until you experience what it's like to work in an agency that behaves like that, it's hard to understand how to make it happen somewhere else. I guess I'm very thankful and lucky that I have worked at a couple agencies that play in that world and understand it, that it does influence how I try and drive things and build things.
So talk to me about becoming the owner of Clean. You didn't found this.
I did not. Clean has been around for 29 years and has had a couple different owners. So the original founder had a data business where he was cleaning data back in the mid 90s, and it was called Clean Data. And he saw an opportunity to open a design shop and called it Clean Design because why not?
Right.
It went along with Clean Data. And I think he held on to it until probably 2010 or 11. And then a woman came in and bought it, and she ran it until 2019, 2020 when I bought it. Her husband had been a strategist at a number of big agencies, and he came back to work with her at Clean and build out Clean to be more of a full service agency. So it was strictly a graphic design shop. And then he built it out to be more of a full service agency. And they were looking to retire. I knew him and used to work with him. And he called me up and said, hey, any desire to come help us run Clean and position it to be sold? I said, well, I'll come help you run it, but I'll buy it, not position it to be sold. Because it's the one thing I hadn't done in this business. I'd always worked for someone else, and it's been a lot of fun working for someone else and learning from other people. But my curiosity made me wonder what it would be like to own my own.
Yeah. That's
And so-
that's a great thing to be curious about.
For sure. You always think, well, if I could do it myself, how would I do it differently? And what would I do? I think the biggest lesson I've learned to date is it's damn hard to do by yourself.
Okay. So what have you done so that you're not doing it by yourself?
Not much until recently.
Okay.
We're in the midst of shifting and bringing in some other people that share a philosophy that I think will be helpful. It's going to make things a little weird and strange for a bit because it's different. We had kept the same core group of people for 5 years, hadn't made any changes in 5 years, really. So bringing in new outside thoughts and people is always a time for change and weird.
Yeah, you're shaking things up. So you've been the owner of the company since 2019, is that correct?
I started running it in 2019. I went through with the purchase during COVID because that's what you do during COVID.
Right.
So in early 2020, I bought it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what would you say are your biggest achievements that you've made at Clean since you've purchased it?
We've stayed in business through a pandemic, which as a small business, there's so many that did not. So you feel very thankful for being able to do that. We have maintained our client relationships since I've taken over. The only one that we didn't was a government client that every 3 years they put it into review and you go through those cycles. But everyone else, we've held on through that. So super proud of making that happen. And then we've continued to grow, probably not at the rate that I'd like us to grow, but we're steadily growing and getting better and smarter about how we do that.
Wonderful. Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, those are huge accomplishments. So you mentioned philosophy when you're bringing in these new people. So how important is it to you to maintain a philosophy that you can get behind? And how do you empower your team to also join in that philosophy?
I think the best way to get people to join into it is really to lead by example. And when I say it's damn hard to do by yourself, that's what I'm mainly talking about. It's hard
Okay.
to be a sole person going at it in a certain way and having enough people find that there's inertia behind that I want to go follow. I think having other people around that also behave in that same way helps to spark others to go, oh, I can see how that could be different, and then go down that road. It's interesting. I've always believed in this business that the role of a manager is to help people when they have times of need or have questions or things like that, but not to sit over their shoulder and micromanage everything they're doing. I think mainly it came from a frustration I had early on in my career where I had people that would do that. I mean, I'd write a presentation deck, then my boss would rewrite it, and then her boss would rewrite it again. You kind of was curious what the point was.
Did you ever find out what the point was?
Yeah, I think it's no. I mean, that's at the time when agencies had, particularly in account management, had group account directors, account supervisors, AEs, assistant AEs, account coordinators. There were so many layers of account people that I think that's just how it worked. And as you talk about agencies changing, I think that's one big part of the change is realizing you don't need to have all the layers you used to have.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I've been in recruiting for over 20 years with creative and marketing professionals, and I've seen things evolve. And it's really been interesting because it's a lot of the times the new generations that are asking for things
Yes.
or looking for new things. So we wonder who really drives the changes. But one of the changes that I noticed early on that same note is flattening. It was probably about 15 years ago. I would hear, we don't have a hierarchy. We have a flat organization. And I understood that not even necessarily as a management, but as anybody can contribute an idea and it will be considered. It doesn't have to go up through the ranks and only the leadership can contribute. Have you seen that evolution? And what do you think are the benefits and the negatives of that change?
I most definitely have seen that 100%. I think there's huge benefits in it. To your point, it does give everyone an opportunity to have a voice and a seat at the table. The challenge, and as you're talking, it just really became evident in my head, the big challenge, particularly for younger people coming into this business, is they want to know what their growth plan is. What is my growth trajectory? And in a flat organization, it's really hard to outline, okay, you're going to go from here to here to here to here, because you don't really have rungs on that ladder.
Okay.
Because it's not a very vertical ladder. And so that is a challenge, because particularly people want to know, okay, and younger people want to make it happen faster. I mean, that's just the way it is. I always had a philosophy that the speed with which you go up the ladder is the same speed with which you come down it. So if you want to rocket ship up a ladder, be prepared to fall just as fast. I don't know if that holds true as much today. Maybe it does still. But I do know people want to move up the ladder really fast and get into a very senior leadership position. And most of the time that just means I want more money. And so it's hard, I think, in a flat organization to really build out what is someone's growth plan.
That's very interesting, because that is something that as a recruiter we advise our clients to put together, is some sort of vision for the long-term plan.
That's great.
To have it, because we don't want the person to start and then after a couple years they have to leave. It's like they need to see how they can stay at the organization for the long run. But when you're talking about that going up the ladder and down the ladder, what really came to mind for me, because in addition to recruiting, I'm also a certified dream builder coach and life mastery consultant. And one of the growth elements, the analogies that we use, is the bamboo plant, right? And so the bamboo plant, for the first 8 to 10 years or something, you don't really see much growth, right?
Right.
It's those little sprouts,
Yep.
and then it just shoots up. And the reason it didn't really show any growth above the soil is because of the rhizome system of roots that was being established to support that growth.
Yep.
And so when someone goes from making, I don't even know I don't place entry-level people, so I don't know what the entry-level salaries are. But let me just guess, $65,000. And then you go to 80 and then 110, and all of a sudden 3 years you're making $120,000. A lot of the times your mind can't conceive that amount of growth in that short of time, and that's where that drop is your mind is not sustainable to hold
Right.
that. And it could be the money, or it could also be the level of responsibility. And so as impatient as we can be as humans, it's really about understanding that growth, it's not necessarily external, the title, the amount of money, it's internal, that internal growth. And that comes with experience, with going for things, failing, learning, right? You talked about making those pitches on the business and how the Martin Agency wasn't always great. I'm sure they're wonderful at it now. So
They're very good at it now.
yeah, I would imagine, especially how they made their mark here. And even when I worked up in New York City, we heard about the Martin Agency. So the name is definitely larger than Virginia.
Mike Hughes was the chief creative officer there, an incredible man. And he always talked about how people didn't come to Richmond for the restaurants. So we had to give them a reason to come to the Richmond.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was a great rallying cry for people who wanted to put out a creative product that was on par with all those people going to New York agencies.
Yep. Even though it is pretty much a straight shot from Virginia.
It is.
Just go right up 95.
Yep. Straight shot, but it can take you a long time sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Especially with traffic, 10 hours. Yeah, I've sat in it
But
before.
Mike Hughes was also the one that was super interesting to the point of 60 seconds and an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. He was the one that would always challenge a creative department to figure out how can you use that space and time in a different way. Which I thought was such an incredible way to think about what you had. Just because everyone's always used that 8.5 by 11 piece of paper the same way doesn't mean you need to keep using it the same way. There are other ways to use that piece of paper. Or he always wanted to create tune in TV with commercials? Like, was there a way with a 30-second spot, if you ran it at the same time every day, could you create enough inertia that people would want to tune in and just see your 30-second spot versus watching a program?
Well, Super Bowl, I mean, that's one
Super
example.
Bowl is one. Everyone tunes in for the commercials more than the game these days.
Yep. So, from that perspective, I mean, you had the piece of paper that could be used at the beginning of advertising, but now you have all these social media platforms. There's different ways you can use those. So, how have you seen your organization, your team really flex with different ideas within the digital platforms?
I think it comes down to being very clear on who we're talking to and ensuring that you're using those in a far more targeted way versus what used to be mass, where you could do one thing and scattershot it across and hope you landed on somebody. But really going, okay, this is our not even target audience. This is the one person we want to talk to. And how do we have that conversation with that one person? And because there's enough people in that group that are going to be of that same person's DNA, not DNA specifically, but their mental DNA, that we can ensure that the message we're putting forth is going to resonate with a broad group.
Wonderful. So, personas is what you're talking
Yes.
about.
Yep.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today, Lee?
Oof, I don't know. It's still a fun business. I mean, I wouldn't keep doing advertising if I didn't absolutely love it and didn't think that it isn't something that keeps inventing itself over and over again. I mean, if you think back to the Mad Men days, yes, there are aspects of that still hold true. You need to have a great idea, and then you need to bring that idea to life in a way that resonates with people. But the channels with which you have to do it are so much broader now. And using each channel for what it's there for. Don't try and take one thing and spray it across every channel. Just because there's more channels doesn't mean that works better. I mean, if you're using TikTok, use TikTok the way people engage with TikTok. If you're using TV, use TV the way people engage with TV. If you're showing up on Spotify, make sure that you're showing up in a way that's relevant to how they use their ad program. You got to be right for the medium you're using.
Right. Being intentional. That's wonderful.
Yep.
Well, thank you for participating in my show, Lee. And I'd love to have you on my show again for us to hear
Absolutely.
more about your experience and your leadership journey.
Would love to. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us at Empowering Creatives to Live Their Dreams. I'm Jessica Osrick. You can do it. I believe in you.